Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Revolve Recap weekly podcast where we help the members of Revolve Church deepen their connection to God, His family, that's you and me, and His mission, that's getting out there in the world. And you get to stay in the loop. You get to hang out with Billy and David. We're back with another week of banter and Bible and best friends. So let's get this week started. Billy. He's my co-host. And I'm David, your real host.
David yelled at me. He said that I took over the host role last week, and so this week he wants to crack the whip.
Yeah.
I'm only allowed to talk.
I was editing the podcast, and I could see both of our tracks, and it was just like yours was all filled with noise, and mine was So this week, I'm in charge. So, Billy, be ready.
I'm ready.
All right. So, this week, as our intro, we are going to have a discussion on... So, Billy knows what we're going to talk about, but we didn't talk about it. So, we didn't hash this out yet. But I had a meeting with two of the guys whom I am discipling, and they're younger guys, and a large part of our discussion was, are they Oompa Loompas? Why did you made, when I said younger guys, you made like a...
They're short. They're very small. Very small people.
And a lot of our discussion this week in our discipleship discussion was, what was life like pre-cell phone? Because if you're a young guy, if you're 20 years old,
yeah,
you don't know.
All the young dudes.
You know, I mean, I guess I've probably had a cell phone for about 20 years now.
I got a cell phone when I was a junior in college.
Yeah.
So junior in college would have been 2003. So yeah, 21 years.
Yeah. So Billy, give me a memory, and then we'll start there. What's a memory of like when you were a sophomore in college? What was
sophomore in college, not high school? We're talking.
Yeah, because you got a cell phone in college.
Junior, yep.
Yeah.
So I mean, before,
so freshman, sophomore Billy,
yes,
hanging out with his friends. What was that like with no cell phone?
Well, a couple things.
No group texts, no TikTok.
Well, there's two different things. First of all, you have to remember that even when we first got a cell phone, it was like the Nokia brick, and it only could like make a call.
Yeah.
Or play Snake.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like a distraction.
That was before T9.
Yes, before the Nokia T9.
Yeah.
And so like it wasn't a distraction, I don't feel like.
Okay.
So even though you had a cell phone, I don't feel like it was a problem. You know what I mean? But I would say that before cell phones in college now, because it was different in high school. In college, you would just put up an away message on Instant Messenger, and you'd be like, "Oh, want to do something tonight?"
I forgot about it.
And you'd hope somebody would read your Instant Messenger.
Yeah.
So it was basically like, that was like text messaging that you could only do from your computer.
Yeah.
That's how I would describe. It was like a mixture of text messaging and Facebook.
Oh, having Instant Messenger.
Having AOL Instant Messenger.
Yeah, I don't think I ever really got into that very much, AOL Instant Messenger.
You were probably too busy like on Merc or something like that.
I think, and this was some of our discussion we had, was what I remember is the idea of you'd get up on a Saturday and you're like, someone will probably just come by, you know?
Yeah.
Or you'd be like, I think I want to go surfing. I'll just drive by someone's house and see if they're there.
Right.
You know, there was a lot more of like, you would just kind of show up. I think things were a little bit more impromptu, or they were planned, you know, in advance, and people would show up because you were like, hey, Thursday, we're going to meet and do this, and people are going to show up.
Well, I was going to say, with Instant Messenger, you'd be like, I'm going to go have lunch at noon at Commons, and you just like, whoever showed up.
Yeah.
Now, before that, in high school, I remember what a big deal it was when my parents went from having one phone number at the house to like 2 phone numbers at the house. Did you guys have more than 1 phone number?
We never did. No.
So like you had the family line, and then eventually one day my parents got sick of us. My sisters like,
it was like
busy
a
enough.
kids line.
It's like a kids line, which eventually became like the modem line.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it was like the kids line, and I remember, so you didn't have to like, you used to have like the 20-foot cord connected to your phone. And so we had like a colonial style house, had a basement. And so you'd get the kitchen phone and you'd have to go as far down the basement steps as you could
to get some privacy.
Yeah. And you would just talk on the phone to your friend about who knows what.
Yeah.
But it was basically like a meaningless, like the same way people text today, except just as meaningless. What David wear? You see what David had on at school? Yeah, so, Mrs. Krabappel, she's so annoying.
Because you went to school in Springfield with the Simpsons?
Yes.
Did you ever, like, your friends would call?
The guy's Billy.
And they would Billy
talk to Billy?
And then your dad would be like, Billy's in trouble right now. He can't come to the phone.
I never got in trouble. My dad would never answer the phone unless it was a telemarketer, and then he'd
mess with him.
He'd mess with him.
Yeah. So let's see, what would be a memory if you could get nostalgic? What would be a nostalgic memory of pre-cell phone?
Yes, okay. Getting on my GT Interceptor, which was like my little BMX bike.
Okay.
And riding my bike up this super long hill that I could barely make up because I was a little chunky Billy.
Uh-huh.
A super long hill to stop at Brian Wayne's house or Andrew Corley's house, and you just hope somebody was home.
Yeah.
And then if they weren't home, you just had to ride your bike home by yourself like a moron. You know what I mean? That was it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they weren't going to come down to my house because then they knew they had to go back up.
Go back up the hill.
So I would have to go up the hill.
That's what's
I'd be like, I hope one of them are here. It's not, they're not here.
Guess they're playing. See, you grow up in Cape May.
Guess they're playing.
There's no hills, so we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, like I guess they're playing football at Jason Ghetto's house or something. But I wasn't invited. That was it. So it wasn't so much. I feel like when we were. So now you're talking like elementary school, middle school. You just ride your bike over to some kid who lived in your neighborhood and hung out.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, hey, can Dave, maybe on like a Saturday, it would be like, hey, can David come over and play?
Yeah.
But for the most part, it was like, well, who's around?
Yeah.
I don't even like that kid, but
he's around.
I can ride my bike to his house.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. So you think about that as a favorite memory that you're kind of
just living on your bike, like the
your
Goonies.
morning. So what is it about? So you think about your kids. Mm-hmm. They don't get to experience that.
Mm-mm.
That's a bummer.
I know, it is a bummer. It is a bummer. And I think like first of all, the world is different now than it was then. You know what I mean? Like you think about the fact that we never, and I'm not trying to make broad brushstroke stereotypes, but there weren't like just random homeless people or drug addicts living in the woods by our house.
Yeah.
And so we'd be like, Brian and Andrew and I would just be like, hey, let's go. And then we would just go like mess around in the woods. And the worst case scenario was we ran into a hunter.
Yeah.
And he just got annoyed because we were loud.
Scared the deer away.
The deer away. And you'd look up and you'd be like, oh, that guy's in a tree stand.
Yeah.
Don't shoot me. That was the extent of it. But we would go to the quarry and we would just explore trails and skip rocks and pretend like we were, fighting dragons or whatever you do when you're that age. You know what I mean? Just having fun.
Yeah, I would say that would be similar. Like, that's a big part of, because
that doesn't exist.
Cape May, North Cape May, isn't as wooded as the area you grew up in, but there's still a lot of woods that, we did a lot of bike riding and exploring. And I was thinking of the memory that I have. I don't know why this sticks out, but it's the first thing that came to mind was my mom calling me home for dinner.
Like outside the house?
Yeah. So I would have to be, you would know about 5 or 6 o'clock. I need to tune in.
Right.
Like I can't be inside my friend's house. I'd have to be in the front yard because I know my mom's going to call me. And she would just be like, David, dinner.
Like a bell. Bing, bing, bing,
yeah.
bing, 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 bing.
And it would be like, you would be in the woods and you would hear that. And you'd be like, all right, I got to go. And just, and there was no like.
Man, I tell you what.
Now, like I call Corey to dinner. He's got to come 10 feet. And he's like, I got to finish up this campaign with the boys. And you're like, no, it's dinner time.
That is Eden. One more minute.
Yeah.
One more minute.
But
Just
no,
one
I was
more
like,
minute.
get on the bike. Sorry, boys, got to go. Started pedaling home. So my boys will never experience.
You know what? We
Melissa
ruined
just-
the world. Now you got me all mad.
There we go.
Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
It's a good thing you're dead. Just kidding.
So think about
Man,
that.
technology has ruined the world. You know what? We should just cancel this podcast and go build a fort. You want to go build a fort?
Let's go build a fort. Just get some old
Get
wood.
some bros together, build a fort.
How many trees did you fall out of as a kid? Just
David,
building forts?
I remember one time. First of all, I remember I built this fort in my backyard with like pieces of scrap and sticks. And my dad was like, we're going to go to Conklin, which was like where you bought lumber.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because it was before Lowe's and Home Depot existed.
It's like 84 lumber.
Yeah, it was like Tri-County, like that kind of thing. We're going to go to Conklin's and then we're going to put like some actual wood because this is like a mess, right? But I remember one time my sisters both had like the flu and I was super jealous that they were getting a lot of attention and I wasn't. So I just kept climbing into my climbing tree. And in my mind, I was like jumping out like 20 feet.
Oh, yeah. It was like
landing on
4
my
feet.
arm and trying to break my arm so I could get some attention. But instead, I think the reality was probably me like hanging on the branch and falling 2 feet and then like falling over on my arm. I didn't break it.
Well, that was...
So maybe that was the genesis of all of my elbow issues.
That's what it is. That's
what
why
it
your
is.
elbow doesn't work from jumping out of that tree like a buffoon.
But going to the quarry, going to the farm, Donaldson's farm, after Halloween. And they had like the extra pumpkins that would be in their fields. And we would take them. And
Just hit them with a bat.
no, we would roll them down
Yeah.
Hilltop Road. Or not Hilltop Road. We'd roll them down Diamond Hill all the way down. And we'd chase them.
Yeah.
And we just kept going, hitting them with a stick. Man, that's what
living.
what it's like to be a kid.
Yep.
I got to move to Africa.
Yep. All right.
But
So
they still do that in
we're going to
Africa.
take a quick break and we're going to look back at yesterday's sermon. But while we do that, why don't you type in the comments, what's your favorite pre-cell phone memory from being a kid? Okay. Do it. Do it. Order it right now. Welcome back. I'm trying to challenge Billy to throw his iPhone away, and he's going to order a Nokia phone right here, live.
I don't know if they...
Be a man of action, Billy.
So the
Let
Nokia,
your yes be yes. Let your
so
no
check
be
this
no.
out. The Nokia 6300 dual SIM, so I can use it when I'm traveling overseas. It still has WhatsApp, so I can still talk to like people overseas.
Your boys.
But it's basically like the old Nokia brick.
There it is. How much is it?
$69. It makes you wonder how much less would I be on my phone. See, but the thing is this. The problem is that when you didn't have your phone for a year, you just were on your laptop a lot too.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I feel like you'd have to be like, you know what?
Yeah, but I wasn't on my laptop when I would go to Panera and be waiting in line when you got to wait 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Those are the times that you get back. Mm-hmm. You know, I was on my laptop at home, when I was like chatting.
That's an interesting comment.
But it's like when you're at a red light, you don't get your phone out and check your text messages.
Gina showed me this. It's not hilarious. It was actually quite damning. I mean, that's too strong of a word.
Oh.
It was this.
We might have to put explicit content now.
Explicit. It was this Instagram reel that I think one of her sisters sent her. And it was like, what if we treated our Bible like our phone?
Yeah.
And this guy
We're
had
at the
his
red
Bible.
light, you just got it
Yeah.
out.
Every time. So he would be like, he was walking down the street holding his Bible, and then he was driving, and he was like, with one hand, he was reading the Bible.
Oh,
and then he stopped at
man.
a traffic light, and he picked up, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is really condemning.
Yeah.
But then you realize, no wonder, like Brother Andrew with God Smuggler, when he was over in another country, didn't speak their language, they spoke to each other by pointing to Bible verses.
I love that story. That's so cool.
That's crazy. Like a whole conversation being like, oh yeah, Proverbs 19:6.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I wonder what Proverbs 19:6 is.
I don't know.
I hope it's something really saucy.
Yeah. But
Many seek the favor of a generous man, everyone who's a friend of man who gives gifts. He's like, look, I'm here with gifts.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, do we take another break?
No, but if anybody wants to join the Nokia dumb phone revolution with me, convince Gina that this is a good idea
I'll do it.
because she's gonna be like, no,
I'll
and then
do
you're
it.
gonna have a green bubble instead of a blue bubble.
I'll do it. I'm going to do it right now. Melissa, if you listen to this podcast, that's how we'll know if Melissa listened to the podcast.
Oh wow,
Buy me a Nokia phone.
6300 Nokia 6300, like new condition, $47 on Amazon.
So yesterday, if you were at church, thank you. I'm glad you made it. If you weren't,
Dead to me.
you ever do that if you have a sore tooth and you suck in like that and that cold air hits that cavity?
Stop doing it. Stop doing it. Dave's getting his tooth pulled today.
Yep.
The 2 front teeth. No, it's not. No. I'm just
All right, so
joking.
every knee shall bow. Now, this is probably, I said this to, we were talking about the sermon at lunch after church, and I was like, this may be one of my favorite stories in the Bible.
Oh, the Dagon
When
story?
Dagon falls
it's
over.
It's like Dagon, Elijah and the prophets of Baal.
Yeah. It's just one of those stories where you're like, what like spiritual warfare was happening that like Dagon's head got cut off?
Yeah, like was Dagon in his little temple, and all of a sudden they wheel in the ark, and he's like, oh,
crud. And Michael comes out, and he just pulls out a sword, and just cuts his little stone head off.
oh man.
And they're like, oh, let's prop him back up.
Right.
Oh, I love that story. It's just what a great story.
Yep.
But
All right, so what was your big takeaway?
my big takeaway? Well, my big takeaway was
You think that's where Dagon comes from?
dag on it. My head just got cut off. I think the big takeaway was you kind of said it there at the end was you gave this illustration of a soldier or a knight handing over his sword to the king to be like, you're in charge. Like I just need to be fully surrendered to you. And I think that was my big takeaway is even in the things that God gives me. So if God gives me this sword, so it makes me a father, makes me an elder, whatever position he's put me in, it's still all his. And I need to surrender to him and just fully surrender to, even if I'm in a leadership position or if I'm in some sort of place of power, it's still his power.
You know what's interesting about what you're saying, and I'm going off the map a little bit here, but
that's fine.
you know, you think about that idea of it's like I'm giving you my sword and hey, whatever you want me to do. You have those things where you're kind of like, I don't want God to call me to do this, but I kind of hope he calls me to do this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like those things where, like if you're a knight giving your sword to the king, you're kind of like, I don't want him to send me on that like really dangerous mission, but I kind of hope he sends me on that really dangerous mission or whatever it might be.
Like when you go and you're going to deliver Bibles and like some
Right,
sort of like
whatever it might
remote
be. You know what I mean?
place.
I just think about that idea where there's something in us that wants God to call us to the impossible.
Yeah.
I can't imagine there's many. I mean, maybe there are some people who just want a really boring life, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
So that was what I was chewing on from the sermon. But I think as on top of that, the scripture that we read before the sermon in the worship team, when we read the Ezekiel with the dry bones, I was kind of still chewing on that today of this idea of God calling us to life out of death. You know, Ezekiel prophesied that these dry bones, that they get up. And I think that I was really chewing on this idea of, you know, we have this new life, 2 Corinthians 5, you know, it's Ephesians 2, right? Isn't Ephesians 2 also? Like we were dead, now we're alive. And sometimes I don't walk in that reality, and I kind of like climb out of that grave, and then I climb back in. And so I think that's another thing I'm kind of chewing on from yesterday is from reading those scriptures during worship of what are the dry bones that I go back to, or what is the grave that I climb back into, where it's like God's like, no, that is dead. This is the new life. Like, I have a new life for you to walk in. And so
was that walking out that surrender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that was my big takeaway from yesterday.
I think for me, it was just reminding me about missions and, this idea of how the nations are going to kneel and how, like, we have so much power now in the new covenant that we're filled with the Holy Spirit and we're commanded to go as an ambassador representing the King. Like, we have absolute power, absolute confidence.
Absolute
nothing,
authority.
Absolute authority. We have nothing to fear. And how are only 3% of our missionaries going to the UPGs? You know what I mean? And then you think about the fact that, are we all just stuck in the rut? Like, why don't more of us feel compelled to do something about it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, is it I'm having a hard time imagining that God's like, I want you guys to do exactly what I want you to do. And your job is I'm only going to send 3% of you.
Yeah.
To minister to half the world.
Your job is to play 3 songs on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Preach a sermon.
Go to Bible study twice a month.
Yeah.
And make sure that you're committed, but not too committed.
Man, Revolve Recap just got deep. Plant that church in Saudi.
Can't talk about it.
Heard it here first, but you didn't hear about it.
So I don't know. The other thing I was thinking about from yesterday's sermon is this idea of God allows temporary defeats, what are perceived as defeats, in order to achieve long-term glory. Like, he allows the Israelites to get destroyed, 34,000 people killed.
Yeah.
To accomplish what? Like, what does he accomplish over those 7 months?
Yeah.
Seriously, what do you think? What does God accomplish over those 7 months that the ark's over in Philistia?
Well, hopefully it's repentance.
But it didn't happen, right? I mean, he showed his glory.
Maybe there was
Dagon got his head chopped off. Aw.
Yeah.
So now the Israelites didn't really change. But in God's economy, he was like, this is what needs to happen for this time period.
Yeah.
And then you think about how North Africa used to be the Christian heart of the ancient world. The Library of Alexandria, St. Augustine, all of these great thinkers coming out of North Africa, and now it's Muslim.
Yeah.
And it's in God's mind, and for some reason, for some way, a temporary defeat is actually beneficial to the long-term perspective of the spiritual war. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very trippy. And even when you think about in the book of Revelation, if you hold to a premillennial perspective, it says that Satan is imprisoned for 1,000 years, and then he's released for a period of time so that he can rally all the nations to rise up against King Jesus. Mm-hmm. So why not just let him get squashed?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so just that idea of temporary defeats, or if you guys have paid attention to the news yesterday, or 2 days ago, rather, there was a bus crash in Tanzania, and 11 YWAM missionary leaders passed away in that bus crash. 25 people together, 11 YWAM missionary leaders. And you're like, God, I know you're sovereign. Like, I know you weren't, wondering if what was going to happen.
Yeah.
But for some crazy providential way, although God is mourning with those who mourn, he also is going to, he realizes that this temporary defeat is going to somehow turn into more glory in the long run.
Yeah.
God's just otherworldly is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Holy, holy, holy.
Yeah. And it goes down to, and we're actually going to talk about this when some of my thoughts on Leviticus. But you think about parenting your own kids, and your 10-year-old definitely thinks they know more than you. Mm-hmm. And you're like, your view of this world is so small.
Yeah.
And I am, as being 30 years older than you, am so much wiser than you. And now you think of that and what God is doing. And you're like, I don't know, God, but I'm going to try to figure it out. Why these, why WAM leaders passed away. And it's like, we may never even know.
Well, and something I read the other day where he said God almost never answers the question why.
Yeah.
Never. I mean, instead, he turns it around.
Yeah.
And instead of asking why, we should be asking, God, what do you want me to hear about you in this situation? What do you want me to hear about my fear that I'm now feeling? Gina was saying to me, how it's like scary to think, these missionaries passed away. That could have been Revolve people on a trip, and it's like the question isn't why did that happen, God? The question should be, what do you want me to hear about this situation?
Yeah.
You think about this: if you get a cut on your finger and it brings you pain, your tooth pain, it's pain is your body telling you there's a problem.
Yeah.
When we have emotional pain, fear, hurt, depression, the pain isn't the problem. And all of our modern medicines are about treating the pain. Get rid of the anxiety, get rid of the depression, that's not the issue.
Yeah.
The pain is a gift to show you that something else is wrong. It's like, so if I'm afraid or if I'm anxious, it's not, well, I got to get rid of my anxiety. The question should be, God, why am I anxious? What is the cause of my anxiety? What do you want to tell me about my anxiety?
Yeah.
What do you want to tell me about my fears with my, what's going to happen to my kids or whatever it might be? That's what God wants to deal with.
Yeah. And I think that's the question when you are trying to teach your kid a lesson, and that's what kids ask. Why?
Yeah.
Why does this? Why does this? Don't worry about why.
Right.
Like, what am I trying to teach you? What am I trying to... Why don't you just thank me that I'm teaching you to floss so you don't have to deal with tooth pain in 30 years? Right. So just thank me.
Right.
And it's like, why God? Why God? Instead of just thanking him for, wow, you're going to do something in this, and I'm not going to know.
Yeah.
And revolvers. Is that what we call our people? Revolvers? Revolvies?
For a long time, I thought about calling them revolvers, and I was like, someone's going to complain.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's my revolvers. Boom.
So we don't know what God is doing, but we worship him anyway. And, if you're going through it right now, we don't know why God is doing it.
We don't.
But maybe ask, what are you doing? Thank you, Lord. The word says, pray without ceasing, and in all things give thanks. And then the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will come to us. So we have that peace only through prayer and thanksgiving. So if you want that peace, stop asking why and start saying thank you. And Lord, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to grow in here?
What do you want me to hear about this? And then from there, we react. I think that's a good transition to look up.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, stretch the legs, and we're going to look at what you've been chewing on, Billy. And I'm loving this. Billy and I have been talking about this for a couple of days, and I'm excited for this. All right, I'm ready. Welcome back to the Revolve Recap, and we're gonna look up what God is doing in the hearts and minds of Billy and David. So, Bill, what you been chewing on? What's God been teaching you from?
I'm not ready to share all of it yet.
Oh, all right. Well, maybe you shouldn't put it on the.
But I wanted to do like a little bit of. I've been thinking a lot about our intro to the hub. When we do the hub, the ABCs of discipleship, when we do that, the first session, and some of you haven't gone through it because you went through the hub back in the day, and so you haven't gone through it. But the first session that we added, I guess it's been like 3 years now, 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years, I think.
Was the idea of identity before activity.
Yeah.
And this idea of how everything we do flows out of who we are. And I've been thinking a lot about that idea and how, it really is true that the most important things we can learn are who is God and who am I. And then that, of course, switches to who am I now in Christ.
Yeah. So this idea, so just to kind of give you like a really boiled down version, is we like to talk about what we need to do, but what we've been doing in the hub is teaching you figuring out who you are for what you do. So if, for an example, as a father, you change diapers and then like you become a father, so that's your identity, and then your action is changing diapers. You're not going to change diapers if you're not a father,
Right?
Or a mother. But
right, and if you try to do it on a random person, it's going to be weird.
Yeah, so that's where we always want to talk about what we're doing, but it's like, no, we need to know who we are in Christ, and then we become ambassadors. Then we
and so you think about it this way, I've been thinking about these ideas and how it flows into every aspect of the ABCs and how we talk about it in the beginning, but then we don't do the best job of making sure we hit it in every single area. So let me give you an example. We talk in the hub about abiding, and we say abiding meaning staying close to Jesus, in the word and the prayer. And we talk about how, you're a child. And so since you're a child, since you're a loyal subject, you need to hear and obey. And that's true. That's an identity to activity piece. But you think of in John 15, he goes as far as saying, I am the vine and you are the branches. And so you realize one of your identities is you are a branch of the vine. The Father is the vine dresser. Jesus is the vine. You are a branch. And it's like, if a branch is going to function, it needs to stay connected. And that idea of, we always say to people, well, we read the Bible, read the Bible, read the Bible. But Jesus is arguing from a place of identity. You're a branch. If you get broken off, you're done. And that idea of identity. Or we talk about ambassador. You're an ambassador. Therefore, you represent God, you represent his kingdom, there's whole other implications of that. But it keeps going. You are a living stone being built into God's house. Peter says that. Therefore, gather together. What good is a stone when it's by itself? But together, a stone builds into this temple. You know what I mean? You are a living, holy priesthood.
Yeah.
That's a communal term. You are a priesthood, a kingdom of priests. Therefore, pursue holiness. Therefore, execute the job of a priest to mediate and to proclaim who he is and to teach others. And so I've been thinking about all these ideas of how identity is so much more prevalent in every aspect of who we are and every aspect of what we do. And then we get so quickly sidetracked by lesser things, And so one of the things that I was thinking about today, this morning, Gene and I were talking about it, coming in 2 Corinthians. He says in chapter 5, you're an ambassador in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. And he also talks about how you are light and they are and the world is darkness. But he says in chapter 5, you're an ambassador. And then chapter 6, he basically says, therefore, in light of what? Since we're an ambassador, he says, therefore, we don't give any offense in anything that we do. Or in other words, he puts it this way. Let me bring in a different translation. He says, therefore, we don't put any hindrance in between Jesus and David. Okay. Since I'm an ambassador, I'm not going to make any hindrance. And instead, he says, we live in a way so that no one will stumble because of us and no one will find fault. Instead, he basically says in verse 4, we bend over backwards to accommodate people. So because I'm an ambassador of Christ, identity, one, I've been tasked with this job, but that means that I'm going to make sure that I don't have any hindrance between David and the cross, and I'm going to bend over backwards even if it costs me troubles, hardships, calamities, being beaten, prison, facing angry mobs, working to exhaustion, sleepless nights, starvation, etc.
Yeah.
And so he says, because I'm an ambassador, I'm going to do everything in my power to make Jesus accessible, and I'm going to bend over backwards, even at great cost to myself. That's identity. if you don't understand the fact that it comes from identity, and then someone says, bend over backwards to accommodate people, you're going to say, I don't feel like it. Or if they say, hey, I appreciate the fact that you're super smart, but your intellect is a hindrance to that child hearing about Jesus.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's not admirable. That's because you're forgetting your ambassadorship.
Yeah.
That you're forgetting your identity. If that's your identity, then that means that you need to share the gospel in such a way where you're not creating roadblocks for people. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so I've just been thinking about this idea of identity, and how we have surface level identity. I'm an ambassador, I'm a son of God, and then we have really deep identity, which is different depending on who you are. We have surface identity, which is true of all followers of Jesus.
Yeah.
But then we have deep identity, which is unique to who I am. Like not everybody's an elder, not everybody's a pastor of a church, that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff.
And I think when you're talking, I'm thinking about an identity is where we get tripped up, and it is what the devil uses to exploit us.
Yeah.
Like how often do we think? Like we don't think, oh, I said that joke about someone, or maybe I shared something that was gossip. What ends up happening is we go, oh, I'm such a
idiot
jerk.
Yeah.
I'm a gossip. And it's like we feel, instead of like taking that conviction of the Holy Spirit, which is like, hey, capture that thought, take that thought captive.
That's not what ambassadors do, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and then it's like the devil wants to exploit that identity, and that's how he attacks us. And then it's like, and then we get jealous of other people's identities. It's like, well, this person is a better communicator, or this person has more patience, and it's like, well, that's their identity. That's how Christ wired them for some purpose.
Or we twist it.
Yeah.
We twist it, and the enemy twists it because the enemy. So, for example, let's say.
But I think the enemy doesn't attack our activity; he attacks our identity.
Right, and so I'm trying to think of an example. So let's say that. One of your identities that you feel like God has spoken over you is that you're a worship leader. Mm-hmm. The enemy goes, yeah, that's all you can do.
Yeah.
You're just a worship leader.
Yeah.
And so it's like the enemy twists. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like he twists it very subtly. Mm-hmm. And so you might say, the enemy might say, you're really good at being whatever.
Yeah.
Or the Lord might say, you're really good at serving people. Mm-hmm. And then the enemy goes, that's all you're good for. Just serving people.
Yeah.
Like the enemy takes the identity and he goes,
yeah.
And he turns it into something rotten.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like he forms it in your mind of that's all you are. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Or you get upset, especially if you're a server, it's like Mary and Martha.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how come no one else is serving like me?
Yes.
Or someone's like, why is that guy serving when he could be worshiping and praying and spending time, whatever it might be. So, but I feel like identity it's so powerful till we walk in our identity where we're like, this is who I am. So I can boldly walk in this identity because this is who God created me to be. This is the work he has for me. So I'm going to step out on faith because I know this is who I am.
And how few people find it out? Like how few people actually know who they are?
Yeah. Yeah. So identity is really powerful, and I'm excited that you're leaning into this a little bit more because I'm excited to explore it with you because I think there's a lot of power in knowing who your identity is, both so God can use you and you can walk in faith, and both so you can be aware of when it's being attacked. Mm-hmm. Because we had talked about 2 days ago, I guess we were having this discussion of when we know our identity, we can almost celebrate the fact of like, well, this is the work that Bill's doing because that's his work. I don't have to be jealous of it or compete for it because I'm going to support him because God has created me to be this person, and we can actually celebrate the work of other people instead of making it a competition.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then this body will thrive.
Right.
Because we go, I'm a finger, and I'm going to be the best finger because God created me to be this finger.
Not a middle finger, though.
No, that's the dirty finger.
Maybe like a thumb.
Yeah. Yep.
No, I agree with you. I think it's really powerful. And to know who you are, where it's like it's like you think about it from a practical perspective, like you know that you're an artist, you know that you're a creative person.
Yeah.
And if you abandon that perspective and you're like, oh, I'm just this guy pretending to do art. Yeah. Instead of, no, that's who God made you to be. Like he's made you a creative person. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. And not everybody is able to do that and think that way and process information and come up with solutions that are creative solutions or whatever it might be. That is a unique gift and it's part of who you are, not just what you do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that idea.
And then if you want to take it one level further, you can say, this is my identity, and how is that relatable to a Star Wars character? Mm-hmm. You know, so you can say my identity is I'm like Chewbacca. You know, or
I can't do Chewbacca.
My identity is
is he a goat?
No, he's not a goat. He's a Wookiee.
He's a Wookiee from Kasich. That was pretty good.
I had to get away from more. You got to get really loud to do that.
Yeah.
So that's your challenge. Figure out your identity, and then make it a Star Wars character.
Yeah, or any pop culture character that we can.
But then that's how you. And then, but
because Scotty said I was Princess Leia.
But to be like, we're making a joke out of it. But you see, when you put all these various people together
on a team,
they become a team, and that's how a team is successful, and that's how the body of Christ is going to thrive when we all realize our identity. And we live it out, and we celebrate other people's identities instead of being jealous of them.
And then we realize that some of the identities you speak over yourself are lies. Mm-hmm. Like when people say, well, I'm a loner.
Yeah.
It's no loners.
Yep.
Literally no loners. God does not create loners.
Yeah.
That's a lie from the enemy, and it undermines your true identity.
Yeah.
Because there's no such thing as a loner.
Because you can't have the one another's.
That's right. Yep. You can't be part of a community. Are you a living stone by yourself? Can't be a loner.
Yep.
And so that's a false identity. And so how many people live out false identities?
Ooh. This is a good podcast. I'm excited. This was a good one today.
Well, what can I tell you?
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we are going to look ahead at 1 Samuel número 7.
Looking ahead with the binoculars.
Looking ahead.
What do you see, David?
I see...
What's on the horizon?
I see 1 Samuel. I was watching Amazing Race.
Okay.
Love that show. Love Amazing Race. And I was really disappointed at how many people could not figure out how to work a monocular, like a telescope.
Well, like they didn't know how to turn it?
Yeah, like people were like looking at it. They were looking the wrong way. I get it. You're on a show, and it's intense, and you want to win. So
but they didn't know how to focus it or something, or what?
It was a broad array of what they couldn't figure out.
Like, is it a club?
Yeah. There was one lady that was looking through it backwards.
She's like, everything's really small.
That was really funny.
Oh my goodness.
So, but looking ahead, 1 Samuel chapter 7, that's what's coming up. I don't know what the contents of that is.
It's basically like it's a transition chapter where it goes through, this is Samuel, he's leading, and then in the next chapter is when they're going to request a new king. And so this one is a little bit lighter. It's really just lessons on leadership from Samuel, and so it's not going to be super duper heavy. It's just going to be looking at the way Samuel led, and if you're reading it in advance, read it and make a little list. There's certain things that Samuel does. It's like he intercedes for the people. He prays and fasts for the people. That's like a leadership lesson, that kind of idea. So it's going to be super practical, looking at leadership lessons from the life of Samuel. I wish his name began with an L, because then it would be like leadership lessons on the life of Samuel.
How about simple solutions for strong... What's a leadership word? It starts with S.
I don't know. Let's ask the thesaurus.
Oh.
Thesaurus is my favorite dinosaur. Simple. All right. A synonym for leadership. Simple
See if it
steward, supervision, shepherding, superintendent.
Okay. So simple solutions.
Samuel's simple solutions for stewarding stupid
sheep.
Here
we go.
Yeah. Shepherding the sheep with simple solutions to Samuel.
We got the 7 S's.
Shepherding the shepherd.
So come this weekend, hear Billy lay out the 7 S's
be
for
great,
simple
guys.
solutions.
Simple solutions with Samuel for shepherding those stupid sheep.
Hey, yeah, so that's what's going on with the sermon. But Bill, you have a class coming up.
I do.
That I'm really excited about.
Wednesday, yes.
This is good.
I guess I should probably prepare for it.
We should. You should. But so give us a 50,000 view, 35,000 view overview of why you did this class, who's it for,
yes,
and what the content's going to be.
Well,
so why'd you do this class?
I did this class, David, because I've never seen a blue duck.
And I just wanted to see a blue duck.
No, I did this class. I'm doing this class because I think I've realized more and more that people don't understand the big picture of the Bible. And I think the Bible introduction class that I had in seminary, of course, that was a semester, not a day, was the most important class I took.
Yeah.
You know, that idea of understanding the big picture of how these books all fit. Once you understand how these books fit together, and when someone is like, well, read 1 Kings, and you're like, got it.
Yeah.
Because then you understand the big general idea, and you can just run. Yep. You know what I mean?
You're going to learn about David and his mighty men. Was that in there?
I'm not going to touch about it too much. That's the end of 2 Samuel. Yeah. But the idea being that...
See, I need to take the class because I don't know where the mighty men are.
Yep. Or the manly men from Men in Tights. They were manly men.
But yeah, so I think when I came to Revolve, that was one of the bigger lessons that I learned when I first started coming to Revolve was seeing that overview of how the Old Testament and the New Testament work together. So yeah, I'm excited about it as well.
Yeah, and I think my plan for this week is basically I'm just going to tell a 2-hour long story, beginning in Genesis and ending in Malachi.
So who is this for? Who should come to this class? What if you've been coming to church for 40 years?
If you don't feel like you can articulate the meta narrative of the Old Testament and the New Testament, then you should come to the class.
Okay.
And even if a couple weeks ago I did this, but I stopped. When we first started 1 Samuel, I did this, and then I stopped at 1 Samuel.
Yeah.
And I had a couple people who came up to me, they were like, I kind of wanted you to just keep going through the whole Bible.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to take 2 hours. I'm just going to tell the big story of Genesis and the story of God wanting to restore presence with his people, because that's really what it's all about.
Yeah.
You know, they were in the garden, then they're not out of the garden. God exiles them. He exiles himself, blah, blah, blah. He just wants to get back with his people. He wants his people to be his dwelling place, but he can't because they're covered in sin. So God gives a sacrificial system to wipe the sin away, but it can't keep it there forever.
So you're gonna give more of the larger story of the Old Testament
through the books, though.
Okay.
So I'm going to be like, in Genesis, this is the story, and that leads into this, that, and that. And then, so it's going to be basically like Genesis through, like the narratives, you know what I mean? So Genesis leading through Nehemiah, Ezra, you know what I mean? And then I'm going to layer the prophets on top and say, while this is going on, Isaiah is prophesying.
You're going to be on that whiteboard.
It's going to be like that meme.
Man, I love that whiteboard.
So that's going to be the idea of it.
That's good. And then, so you're going to do Old Testament this week, New Testament next week.
Yep.
And then you're going to go into like OAI type observation.
2 weeks of practicing. Okay, now that you know this, you know that the big picture of 1 Samuel is the establishment of the monarchy. And so now I'm going to give you a passage.
Yeah.
And you're going to read the passage, make observations, and you're going to interpret it, which is, what did it mean to the original audience? Why is this passage in 1 Samuel? And then you pick it up and move it into the New Covenant, and you say, well, what does it mean for me?
Yeah.
Because I'm not waiting for a monarchy. Oh, but I am waiting for Jesus to return.
Yeah.
That kind of idea.
I would highly recommend you coming. RSVP, you don't have to RSVP, but if you do, let us know, because there will be food provided because it's during dinner time.
Let me preface that, because some people were like, oh, you're providing dinner? I'm providing some lasagnas this week because I know people are going to forget to bring food, but it is a potluck, which means you should bring a normal amount of food. I don't need you to bring
a whole tray
6
of
crock pots. You know what I mean? But if you want to bring a salad you know, or a loaf of garlic bread, that kind of idea. Just bring something to share.
I normally will have, like if I was to have hot dogs, I would have 2 hot dogs.
Okay.
So I'm only going to bring 2 hot dogs.
No, that's not a
hoping
problem.
to trade
For a lasagna.
with someone with lasagna. So I'm going to bring 2 hot dogs. Maybe someone will bring a burger.
Well, maybe
and
instead
we
of
can
bringing
make a
2
trade.
hot dogs, you could bring 10 hot dogs.
But
So you act like you're cooking for your family.
Okay.
But Dave, this isn't a very complicated. Melissa does most of the cooking, doesn't she?
Poor Melissa.
David's like, I brought an instant cup of mac and cheese.
Yes.
1. And I'm going to trade it for a
because
filet mignon.
if I bring 10 hot dogs and you bring 6 burgers, and it's not a good potluck because then we're going to have a ton left over.
Just, guys,
If I bring 2 hot dogs and you bring a burger, I could say, hey,
give me your burger.
give me your burger and you can have my hot dogs. And
Or
then
you just go, give me your burger. And then you enjoy them.
That's normally how I show up to potlucks. I just assume that somebody's going to bring a whole tray of
Just
ziti.
kind of like rubbing your belly.
Yep.
What we got?
Yep.
Nobody brought any fried chicken? This is ridiculous.
Yeah. You know someone's going to bring a big salad, so I'll just eat some of that, some ziti.
Yeah.
I'm good.
You know Brenton's going to come with like a Domino's pizza.
Yep. So
You know?
that's how I roll it.
Well, I'm bringing 2 lasagnas, which will feed like 12 people. You know what I mean? But I also don't know if anybody's going to remember to potluck it.
Yep.
So
I'm going to bring a hot dog now to trade.
just bring yourself, David. Just bring yourself. Have you bring some like
What are the deets? Do you even know what time this class starts?
5:30 to 7:30.
On Wednesday?
Right? Is it 5:30, 7:30? I'm pretty sure it's 5:30.
Check the church center
I'm
app.
checking it. Going on revolvechurchnewjersey.com, looking at the online bulletin. Explore the Word, 5:30 to 7:30, begins this Wednesday, February 28th.
Great.
We'll see you there.
We'll see you there. Revolve Recappers, thanks so much for tuning in. Tell your friends. Tell your friends. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with other people in Revolve because I think this was a good one.
And even if there's something you're like, maybe they don't go to Revolve, and you can say, hey, jump to 12 minutes in where they talk about whatever.
Cell phones.
Yeah.
And how cell phones turn you into a bunch of mindless babies.
Hey, guys.
Go ride your bike.
Go ride your bike. Have
Go
a great
find a
week.
hill, ride up it, ride down it.
Let's go ride a bike. Out on the house. No, that's fly a kite.
We should do that as well.
You know, I don't think my kids have ever flown a kite before.
Oh my gosh, we love kites. We're a big fan of kites. I have so many kites in my garage that
really?
are just
A mess. None of them work.
none of them work.
Guys, go fly a kite. Go ride a bike.
Yep.
Have a good day.